Pardon? Ouais.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to all of you joining us online from around the world. My name is Bronnie Maloney and I'm a senior advisor for early childhood nutrition in UNICEF headquarters in New York. And I am passionate about protecting all children from all forms of malnutrition. And of course, as we all know, the best way to protect children from malnutrition is to start life with early initiation and exclusive breastfeeding. So you're all very welcome to join all of us at the 2023 World Breastfeeding Week celebrations hosted by the Global Breastfeeding Collective. And our webinar today will celebrate this year's theme. Our theme is enabling breastfeeding, making a difference for working people. So before we get started, let's have some housekeeping points. I'm happy to report that we have simultaneous interpretation services available, and we have a number of different languages. We have Arabic, Chinese, English, French, Russian, and Spanish. To find the language that you would be comfortable listening into, please click on the interpretation button at the bottom. You can see the icon on the slide and choose your preferred language. When we have a speaker speaking in a different language, you will need to move to the English channel if you would like to hear listen in English. However, for the rest of the webinar, when we're speaking in English, please just stay in the main channel if you would like to listen to English. In addition, if you have any questions, please remember to post them in the Q&A box. You'll see the Q&A box also on the bottom of your screen. Please do not post questions in the chat. The questions you can post can relate to any part of this webinar, and we will address them towards the end of the session. And we'll aim to answer as many as we can, of course. However, if you do have any technical issues, please begin your question with the word support, S-U-P-P-O-R-T, using all uppercase letters, and then we can try and assist you where possible during the session. Also, I wanted to advise that unfortunately, we will not be able to provide any certificates for today's presentation, but we will be sharing a link to all of you who have registered where you can access the recording. And as usual, we will make the recording available in all the languages on the website for the Global Breastfeeding Collective. So that will be posted within a few days and probably up to a week after this event. So now I'm delighted to get us started. So let's have a look at today's fantastic agenda. We're going to hear some opening remarks from our Global Director of Nutrition and Child Development from UNICEF. Then we're going to hear a video of women speaking about their own experiences of how they were able to achieve their breastfeeding goals when they returned to work. We're then going to hear some global level statistics on where are we on achieving our global nutrition targets for breastfeeding. Then we'll have a speaker from the International Labour Organization describing to us issues around so we can better understand maternity protection conventions provisions. Then we're going to have a panel of excellent speakers from governments from around the world in terms of how best they have achieved supporting their mothers in their countries. And then, of course, we will allow, depending on the time availability, we will allow some questions to be answered. So we have a packed agenda. You will be with us for about 90 minutes. So we're going to start now with hearing from our Global Director of Nutrition and Child Development from UNICEF, Dr. Victor Aguayo.
Colleagues and friends, it gives me great pleasure to welcome all of you to the 2023 World Breastfeeding Week webinar on behalf of UNICEF and WHO. Today is a reason to celebrate. Over the last 10 years, we have seen a 10-point increase in exclusive breastfeeding rates globally. With exclusive breastfeeding rates now at 48%, we are on track to achieve the World Health Assembly target of 50% by the year 2025 globally. So be proud. This success is due to the efforts we have made, all of us around the table, to protect, promote, and support breastfeeding across the world. You have lots to celebrate. Wherever children are born, breastfeeding gives children the best start in life. The science behind the benefits of breastfeeding is clear. Breastfeeding protects babies from common infectious diseases, which can make the difference between life and death. Breastfeeding strengthens children's immune systems and provides children with the nutrients they need to grow and develop to the full potential. Breastfeeding protects children against overweight, obesity, and chronic diseases later in life. And breastfeeding reduces women's risk of diabetes, obesity, and some forms of cancer. So let's be clear, breastfeeding truly is best feeding. For this year's World Breastfeeding Week, we are focusing on the need to support breastfeeding in the workplace. The question is why? And the answer is simple, because for millions of women, returning to the workplace is the single most important barrier to exclusive breastfeeding and to continued breastfeeding. So today, we're going to hear from some women about their personal experiences in returning to the workplace and trying to breastfeed an infant while they resume work. And we will also hear about some impressive efforts by governments to support breastfeeding in the workplace. At UNICEF and WHO, we are committed to support breastfeeding in the workplace because it benefits babies, it benefits women, it benefits businesses, and it benefits societies. That is why today we are calling on all stakeholders to do three important things. The first one is to ensure a supportive breastfeeding environment for all working women. This includes access to lactation breaks and facilities that enable women to breastfeed their babies once they return to the workplace. The second one is to provide sufficient paid leave to all working parents to meet the feeding needs of their young children. This includes paid maternity leave for a minimum of 18 to 24 weeks or more after birth. And the third one is to increase investments in breastfeeding support, including a national policy and program that regulates and promotes public and private sector support to breastfeeding women in the workplace. So let's work together to make breastfeeding at work work. I want to thank everyone attending this meeting, everyone sitting around this table for all your efforts, all your work in the promotion, in the support, and in the protection of breastfeeding in so many countries, in so many settings. And I want to thank the Global Breastfeeding Collective for bringing us together today, and more importantly, for keeping breastfeeding high in the global agenda, but also in national agenda. So thanks to everyone.
Thank you so much, Victor, and apologies for some of the quality of the video, but I think the remarks are very clear in highlighting what are the main advocacy issues for this year's theme. Now, one of the most important videos that we tend to do every year as a Global Breastfeeding Collective is to actually hear from mothers themselves. What are their experiences? And these videos are very impactful because this is really what matters most. How are our global policies and programs actually directly impact mothers and babies themselves? So this year is another year where we also wanted to hear the voices of mothers. So we asked mothers, what would they say to other mothers looking for tips for maintaining breastfeeding when returning to paid employment? And what can employers do to make it possible to combine breastfeeding and employment to help these women achieve their breastfeeding goals? So the following video, we will hear their thoughts.
Breastfeeding and work, this is very doable, and I know it because I did this 5 years ago when I had to go back to work and continue breastfeeding for my twin boys.
Be bold in advocating for yourself at work.
Communicate with your employer.
Feed freely when you're around your little one. It's wonderful.
I work in live theater, so I'm frequently using wearable pumps while I'm working because we work on a tight schedule.
Treat your pumping breaks as seriously as any other meeting and add them to your calendar.
But I do feel really good about getting milk that I can send with my son to daycare to help his little immune system fight all the winter illnesses that he's come into contact with there.
A breastfeeding-friendly environment benefits everyone.
Please don't let going back to work stop you from breastfeeding your little one. I went back to work when my little one was 10 months and she's 5 today.
We are the change makers so that one day our girls can feel comfortable as breastfeeding mothers in all the roles that they will play.
Employers are very key in ensuring that women are able to exclusively breastfeed their children.
One thing that employers can do to make women feel like the work we're doing breastfeeding is important is provide us with good facilities.
A really robust policy.
Offer flexible work hours.
My manager let me set my schedule, and I took my laptop with me when I went to pump so that I could keep working while pumping.
Allow mothers to work on a part-time basis or to gradually increase their hours to make the transition back to work smoother.
We encourage employers to allow babies into the workplace at safe.
Let breastfeeding mothers know that it's okay and that they are allowed to advocate for what they need.
Provide a safe and nurturing environment where other employees are educated and supportive.
Help normalize breastfeeding in the workplace.
So thank you so much to all those fantastic moms from around the world who shared their stories and gave lots of tips. And it really starts with, the employers and the governments putting in place policies. But we also need to remember that all of us equally need to stand up and ask for our rights too. And I think these women clearly demonstrated that we need to ask our employers to give us the support we need to achieve our breastfeeding goals. So thanks again to all of those fantastic messages from around the world. So now we want to pull back a bit. We want to look at where we are globally in terms of our global nutrition targets on breastfeeding. And I'm delighted to invite my colleague, Fatima Sise, who is our infant feeding lead at the UNICEF headquarters in New York, who is going to give us that overview. Fatima, over to you.
Thank you so much, Grania. Next slide, please. UNICEF and the World Health Organization, we know, recommend that infants start breastfeeding within 1 hour of birth, be exclusively breastfed for the first 6 months of life, and continue breastfeeding until 2 years of age or beyond. And we know that decades of research have shown how breastfeeding has incredible benefits for babies, children, mothers, and the society. So today, we are going to share the success that we have made in meeting some of our breastfeeding targets and see where else we need to push to reach these goals. Globally, the rate of breastfeeding, as we can see on the slide, falls short of the targets set by the Global Breastfeeding Collective. Between 2015 to 2021, we know that 47% of infants initiated breastfeeding within the first hour of birth against a target of 70%, leaving far too many newborns waiting for too long for this critical contact with their mothers. And for the same time period, infants under 6 months of age exclusively breastfed reached 48%, and the global target set by the World Breastfeeding Week is, however, to reach 70% by 2030. While 70% of women continue to breastfeed their infants for at least 1 year, by 2 years of age, the breastfeeding rates decline to 45%. Next slide, please. But as already noted, there is a lot to celebrate today and for this year's World Breastfeeding Week. As seen here, the global rates for exclusive breastfeeding are now at 48%. This is a lot to celebrate as we are closer to meeting the World Health Assembly target of 50% by 2025. And this increase is higher than a decade ago, representing 10 points progress in exclusive breastfeeding rate since 2012. This is remarkable, and we should all be proud of ourselves. Next slide, please. However, there are regional disparities in meeting our exclusive breastfeeding targets. While the global rate of exclusive breastfeeding is at 48%, sorry, according to recent UNICEF data, disparities still exist in regions. We have the South Asian countries having the highest exclusive breastfeeding rates at 61%, followed by East and Southern Africa with the second highest breastfeeding rates at 55%. But 1 in 3 of these infants in the Middle East and North Africa are exclusively breastfed, and only 26% in North America are exclusively breastfed. So we really need to close the disparities and gaps. Next slide, please. So continuing with the good news, the progress, according to UNICEF's latest analysis, we have seen that 21 countries have increased their breastfeeding, exclusive breastfeeding rates by at least 10 percentage points. And countries as diverse as Cote d'Ivoire, Marshall Islands, the Philippines, Somalia, Vietnam have achieved large increases in breastfeeding rates, showing that progress is possible when breastfeeding is promoted, protected, and supported. Next slide, please. But the good news is we know what works. There is a lot that needs to be done to meet our breastfeeding goals. But we know that when policies, programs, and actions are implemented at scale to protect, promote, and support breastfeeding, we know that progress is possible. These are the 7 policy priorities set out by the Global Breastfeeding Collective, as well as all our partners, to promote and support breastfeeding. And these include protection at the workplace, implementing the code on breast milk substitutes, as well as the World Health Assembly resolutions associated with this, skilled breastfeeding counseling, and many others. Next, please. But we know that maternity leave, as we celebrate World Breastfeeding Week this week, is associated with longer breastfeeding duration together with other health and benefits, including lowering infant mortality. And we also know that enabling support at the workplace can improve breastfeeding rates, job performance, and employee retention. And indeed, next slide, please. We also know that the code makes a difference. Countries that are fully aligned with the code are making progress in meeting their breastfeeding targets. Next, please. So therefore, the time for all of us to act is now to give millions more children the best start in life for every child and everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fatmata. And I think this is very inspiring news that sometimes there's a lot of negativity around global public health, but I think we can all feel proud and feel inspired that we are continuing to see progress in our global nutrition targets on breastfeeding. But of course, there is much to be done. And given this year's World Breastfeeding theme is around family-friendly policies, who better to give us an update on the status of family-friendly policies than our experts from the International Labour Organization. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Emanuela Pozan, who is a senior gender equality and non-discrimination specialist from the International Labour Organization, from the branch, the Gender Equality, Diversity and Inclusion branch, and work quality. So Emanuela, over to you.
Thank you very much, and a very good day to all of you. I'm very impressed to see how many people are connected, given that it's a summertime in some parts of the world. So congratulations to the organizers, and I'm very happy to be a part of this conversation. So at the International Labour Organization, we have placed very, very high in our agenda the overall topic of the care economy. And, you know, within the care economy, we really look at the care economy as a way to create care jobs, but also and especially to promote a more balanced sharing of unpaid care work between women and men and between the family and the state. And it is for this reason that care policies are very much part of the gender transformative agenda that ILO constituents have crafted, and that is very much reflected in a number of declarations and call for action, as well as many of you know, is also part of the Secretary General of the UN Common Agenda. The point is that we all agree that it's important to invest in care, in having care very high, as a very high priority, but the question is always, how do we do that and how do we go go about it? So next slide, please. And the point is that we do need a very comprehensive approach, 360 degrees approach. As ILO, we have promoted this ILO 5 R's framework, a high road to decent care work. So a high road is very ambitious, but it is also difficult, because when we talk about a high road to care work, we're looking at a number of overarching policies, care policies, macroeconomic policies, social protection policies, labor policies, equality and non-discrimination, migration, and environmental policies. And all these policies actually need to have very well ingrained in their design and in their in the impact that they aim for gender equality and all these policies that can really help redistributing unpaid care work, while also recognizing, reducing unpaid care work, and representing and valuing care workers. Next, please. Now, here, what we are talking about is very much care policy packages that need to be transformative in nature. They need to be in line with international labor standards, country-specific. They need to pursue a life cycle, and this is very much also where we see breastfeeding coming into playing a role into this. And bottom line, it's essential that all these care policy packages that they provide, they are a good combination in terms of providing time in the form of leave, care leave, maternity, paternity, parental leave, breastfeeding breaks, and other care-related leave, such as long-term care leave, emergency leave, and time off for antenatal health care. But we also need, of course, income security benefits in the forms of maternity, paternity, parental leave cash benefits, income security for breastfeeding, long-term care cash benefits, and of course, rights and services. Rights in terms of non-discrimination, freedom from violence and harassment and employment protection, right to decent work, right to safe and healthy workplaces, and services, maternal and child health care services, the overall child care services, nursing facilities, long-term care services. Next, please. Now, we have, with the latest report of the ILO, we have tried to take the temperature of care policy packages and their relation with the world of work, in line, of course, with international labor standards, in particular Convention 183 on maternity protection and Convention 156 on workers with family responsibilities. And what we see is that there are some good news, some improvements. Overall, there are some improvements, but of course, the gaps remain extremely wide. And this is where all our communities need really to continue pushing. So just looking at the ratification status of the Maternity Protection Convention number 183 and 156, we see that there are improvements. We also see that there are countries that are currently looking into some of these conventions, and negotiations are happening at the on the ground to really try to push. We see a renewed interest in some of these conventions. So this is a very good sign. However, if we look at the next slide, however, just to give an idea, 98 out of 185 countries have maternity leave laws in line with the ILO Maternity Protection Conventions, but we still have 649 million women that lack adequate maternity protection. And you very well know the consequences of this. Next, please. As well, the presence of maternity leave schemes aligned with the provisions of Convention 183, we see that that there are still large gaps. Next, please. I'll run quickly through this information, because I'm sure that many of you are already aware, and it's all available online. Perhaps a very interesting finding of the latest report that was also confirmed by the very latest Equimundo report is that there is a rise in men's care rights and responsibility, and there is much more of a voice from the side of men in wanting to be part of care leave policies and wanting to benefit from this care leave policies. So we see that paternity leave laws are on the rise. We have 115 countries that provide paternity leave, 33 new countries compared to 2011. So the trend is positive. And yet we have 1.26 billion men that live in countries that do not provide paternity leave. And we know very well the benefits of having men also being part of taking care of children since the very early, moment that children come to this world. In particular, first of all, of course, there's much more support to the women, so avoiding having burnout and also providing more opportunities to go back to work, but also everything that has to do with the early development of the child. And therefore, we all think that this is an area where much more work is needed, and where we see a shift in mindsets. However, as we know, a lot of paternity leave is still not paid. If it is available, it is very short. And gender stereotypes tend to limit the possibility of men to take up paternity leave even when available. Next, please. And of course, another area of this continuum of care, so looking at maternity, paternity, and parental leave, which is a very, very important care leave policy, which is one of those policies that is very much helping balancing work and family responsibilities over the life course. And here as well, we see that we have 68 countries that have parental leave, but only in 46 countries parental leave is paid. And there are some countries that use parental leave in a way that is kind of counterproductive, because parental leave is a relatively cheap, quotation marks, is a relatively cheap care leave policy that in many countries is used to substitute the provision of childcare facilities and services. And therefore, I think we need to look very carefully into parental leave. We know very well that those countries that are continuously experimenting what is the right formula about parental leave. There is no country that yet has it figured out. But the important thing is that parental leave needs to become part of a continuum of care leave policies, and that fathers' take-up rates of parental leave are still very low compared to women. But we do see a trend that is slowly taking place, and where more men are taking parental leave with the same benefits that I was discussing before, especially in terms of role models, in terms of outcomes development for children, interaction and stimulation also with the father and not just with the mother. And overall, having fathers taking both paternity and parental leave, we do see that there is a good correlation with child health due also to the increase in breastfeeding frequency. Next, please. And so here we come to the breastfeeding at work, which is what is of interest for today, and clearly it is a very important enabler for positive nutrition and health. Convention 183 on maternity protection talks about women workers should be provided with the right to one or more daily nursing breaks or a daily reduction of working hours, which should be counted as working time and remunerated accordingly. And we do see that in 138 countries, there is the provision of statutory right to time and income security for breastfeeding. 80 countries grant 2 daily nursing breaks, and 199 countries offer the right to daily breaks, the nursing breaks for 6 months or more. And you can have a look to the rest of the information. Nevertheless, we still have nursing break that remain unpaid, including in some high-income countries. So this is certainly an area where we need to continue working, and awareness raising can be very effective, especially within the context of all the wealth of knowledge that this more than 1,000 participants have. Next, please. Now, so as we are looking at care policy packages as a continuum, going from maternity, paternity, parental, breastfeeding, and there are other, of course, employment-related policies and non-discrimination policies that are very relevant, especially in a context of having women to come back to work. It is also of vital importance, the role of childcare in societies and economies. And here we see where we have the largest gaps. Only 1 in 10 potential parents have access to free and affordable childcare services. And in fact, 21 out of 178 countries grant universal childcare services in their laws for children aged 0 to 2 years. This is an area, next please, where we have one of the largest gaps. And in fact, as ILO, we have measured the childcare policy gap, which is the difference in time between the moment that maternity, paternity, and parental leave policies end and the moment when childcare services, universal and free or affordable, start. And globally, we have a gap of 4.2 years, which is huge, because who's going to fill this gap? Usually it is women staying out of the world of work or compromising and finding alternative solutions for either, being in the informal economy or going to reducing working hours or dropping out entirely from the labor market. Next, please. So the ILO, what we have done, we have really tried to make a strong investment case for transformative and nationally designed care policy packages, which would require important investments, but the return is also extremely high. So we foresee that 0.29% of the GDP on average would be needed, which is equivalent to more or less 362 billion annual in investment, would be required to expand adequately paid childcare related leave to close the childcare policy gap and offering at least 60 minutes of paid breastfeeding breaks. And we would need up to, and this would also generate up to 5.5 million jobs that would be from investing in childcare related paid leave and breastfeeding policies by 2035. We foresee that this type of jobs, 41% would probably go to women, and 37% would be is expected to be in the formal employment. So there is an important business case to make when we talk about care policy packages and investing in care policy packages in terms of jobs, creation of jobs, but of course also in terms of having more women and men being able to participate in the labor market. Next, please, although I think that I'm almost done. So to conclude, we do see the need to accelerate support for investment in care policies, and there are some key actions that very much need to be taken besides building knowledge, data, and awareness of paid and unpaid care work and the impact that paid and unpaid care work have in the world of work and in changing social norms. We also need to identify care needs for target populations and building the fiscal space, the regulatory, framework and the technical capacities needed to design, finance, and implement inclusive care policies. And I'm very happy to see that there is more and more interest in placing high in the agenda the care economy as a whole, in G20, in G7, at the UN, in the future discussion on the Sustainable Development Goals. I think we really have gone very far compared to where we were 10 years ago in terms of positioning well care, because care is about politics. Care is a right, the right to care, the right to be cared for. And care is essential for taking care of the environment, which is going to be the top priority of the coming decades. And so as well, looking at designing rights-based programs through social dialogue, because when we talk about the world of work, social dialogue is essential in making sure that the rights of workers and employers are well addressed, and addressing representation deficits that we have in terms of care workers. For instance, as you know, care workers, 70% are women. We're talking of a very large population of workers, 380 million care workers, many of whom are in the informal economy, very often characterized with poor working conditions, exposure to violence and harassment, low wages, etc. And we need to enhance the capacity of governments, workers' organizations, employers' organizations, together with all the civil society, to develop and contribute to care policy development and implementation in every country, because care is a common denominator to every single country, and it's a core issue of humanity. So I will stop there, and if there is any question, I'll be happy to respond later on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emanuela. That was a fantastic presentation, and I've learned a lot, and I'm sure many of the colleagues online have learned a lot. And I think hearing you refer to care as a right is so important when we're talking about rights-based programming and rights for women and children and rights for our planet. And so we need to look at it from a much broader, larger frame. And I think you've given us a lot of the really important language for all of us to advocate in our settings. I'd like to remind those listening online that there's well, it's covered up on the text now, but www.ilo.org is the website where all of these resources are available. There we go, thank you. Please go in there and have a look around, because there's a whole treasure trove of resources available for you all on this subject. In addition, on the Global Breastfeeding Collective website, www.gbc.org, we also have a number of resources on this subject too. So please feel free to reach out and access those resources. So now moving on, I am delighted to introduce our next speaker. Dr. Katie Pereira-Hotze is a senior nutritionist at the First Steps Nutrition Trust in the UK. She recently undertook a PhD from the University of Western Cape in South Africa, where she investigated access to comprehensive maternity protection amongst women working in the informal sector in South Africa. So Dr. Hotze, over to you.
Thanks very much, Grania, and thank you for the opportunity to share some insights around maternity leave and workplace breastfeeding support. And I'm going to try to share a snapshot of some of the evidence available to support recommendations and practical suggestions around maternity leave and workplace accommodations for breastfeeding. Next slide, please. So most of you will be familiar with the World Breastfeeding Week website, hosted by the World Alliance for Breastfeeding Action, WABA. And I just wanted to acknowledge that many of the images and resources in my PowerPoint presentation come from here. So I encourage you to check out this website and download the resources available, because many of these can be used beyond World Breastfeeding Week as well. Next slide, please. So by way of introduction, comprehensive maternity protection is a human right for all female workers. And in the past, maternity leave and workplace support for breastfeeding was mainly viewed as a labor right managed by human resources departments. But there's a lot of evidence now to show the public health benefits. So we're starting to view maternity protection as more of a public health intervention as well. And we know that universal maternity protection could contribute to decent work and minimum basic incomes for all working women, and that this would have far-reaching health and development benefits if women were supported to breastfeed. And we also know that as of today, only 43 countries globally have ratified the ILO's Maternity Protection Convention 183 of 2000. And this gives some kind of indication that more commitment and international accountability on maternity protection is needed. Next slide, please. So while I'm going to be focusing on maternity leave and breastfeeding support at the workplace, it's also important to remember that all of the components of comprehensive maternity protection are needed to support women to be able to successfully breastfeed and work. And these include maternity leave, but also cash and medical benefits during pregnancy and during maternity leave, health protection at the workplace, non-discrimination and job security or income protection around the time of pregnancy, childbirth, and while breastfeeding, access to breastfeeding breaks, and also access to childcare support. And if women can't access any of these components of maternity leave, that has the potential to disrupt breastfeeding. Next slide, please. So there's much evidence and recent reviews and studies, specifically from the last 10 years, to show and give clear evidence that paid maternity leave and breastfeeding support at workplace has direct benefits for children, mothers, employers, and businesses, including a longer duration of breastfeeding, improved immunization rates, lower infant mortality rates in both low and high income countries, and improved workplace productivity and decreased absenteeism. So benefits for children, mothers, employers, and businesses. And these are health, social, and development benefits as well. But workplace challenges remain a common reason why women stop breastfeeding earlier than recommended or earlier than they'd planned. Next, please. So globally, we know that a mother's return to paid work after childbirth is a leading reason for early supplementation with artificial formula and early cessation of breastfeeding. And this was documented in the 2016 Lancet Breastfeeding series already. Next, please. We also know that research has shown that paid maternity leave policies could help reduce infant mortality by 13% for each additional month of maternity leave. And this was research conducted by Nandi and colleagues, published in 2016, but a review of the demographic and health survey data, including 300,000 live births from 20 low and middle income countries between 2000 and 2008, that documented and showed this clear relationship between paid maternity leave and reduced infant mortality. Next slide, please. So we need to be mindful that historically, maternity protection has been targeted to more full-time, permanently employed women workers in formal jobs, but informal and non-standard workers remain vulnerable. And the number and percentage of workers in informal positions or non-standard employment is increasing globally, and it's higher in certain regions, especially low and middle income countries. And many people employed in this way receive no or limited general labor benefits, let alone maternity protection, which is sometimes viewed as a luxury or added extra. But as we've shown, and most of us know, is an integral part of labor and worker rights. So women in positions of non-standard employment often can't access maternity protection. And from some of the research I was involved in, we had participants and a domestic worker, for example, in South Africa, saying that she went back to work 2 weeks after delivering her baby because she didn't get paid. And so she needed to work. And a woman can't physically recover from childbirth, let alone establish exclusive breastfeeding or make feeding and childcare arrangements within 2 weeks and go back to work. And the reality is that research or the reports show that most women can't access paid maternity leave. Only 45% of women with newborns actually receive cash payments while on maternity leave. And obviously this has negative impacts for breastfeeding practices. Next slide, please. And while there are many challenges for informal workers to access maternity protection, we also need to be aware that there are low-cost ways of supporting pregnant women and new mothers in informal employment, like rearranging tasks, adjusting work hours, and supporting breastfeeding and informal childcare where possible. Next, please. So many of us and different groups and sectors are responsible for improving maternity protection and leave and breastfeeding for working parents. And this information comes from the action folder on the World Breastfeeding Week website. And I'm just going to highlight some of these recommendations. Next, please. So some recommendations for government include passing legislation that ensures paid maternity leave for at least 6 months for all women workers through country-specific appropriate funding mechanisms that include public sector funds. And the World Health Organization recommends exclusive breastfeeding to 6 months. We know that breastfeeding decreases when women return to work. So even though the International Labour Organization Maternity Protection Convention says a minimum of 14 weeks, which is around 4 months of maternity leave, should be provided, and the ILO recommendation 191 recommends 18 weeks. 6 months is actually 26 weeks, and this is what we should be striving for in government legislation as well as company and employer policies to support women to be able to breastfeed. We also need to ensure implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of existing legislation, funding mechanisms for informal sector and self-employed workers to be able to access cash payments while on maternity leave, and to ensure that breastfeeding breaks and breastfeeding rooms are an actual legal requirement. It's also important to note that parental leave entitlements should be clear in policy and legislation, and often it's not fully clear what parents should be entitled to. Next slide, please. Employers and trade unions can also ensure 6 months of paid maternity leave, can ensure that they provide breastfeeding rooms and breaks, and also encourage enrollment as accredited breastfeeding-friendly workplaces. Next, please. Many companies, organizations, and employers can go beyond national minimum legislation and strive to rather align with the global guidance from the health authorities, World Health Organization and UNICEF, to provide more generous parental leave and family-friendly policies. Next, please. The health sector also has a role to play, and breastfeeding support can be incorporated as an occupational health issue. There's various ways healthcare workers can support parents. And an example from South Africa is that the Department of Health has a national side-by-side campaign that was established in 2019 already, with a really helpful guide for employers and employees about supporting breastfeeding in the workplace. But not many people are aware of this, and it's not widely used or available in workplaces. And it's something that other government departments could share, and employers as well. Next, please. Parents can also try to facilitate support of breastfeeding in the workplace by speaking to employers as early as possible, negotiating return to work conditions that encourage them being able to breastfeed. Next, please. And within the community, people can encourage employers who've seen benefits of parental leave where they work to publicize and recommend this to others, and also to mobilize civil societies to continue advocacy for the right to paid leave for working parents. And so those are all of the recommendations from the different groups and sectors of the many actions that can be done to improve access to maternity protection for all workers. Next, please. So hopefully I've provided some resources of evidence that can be used to convince the stakeholders that need to be convinced of the importance of comprehensive maternity protection, adequate paid maternity leave, and access to breastfeeding breaks for all working women, and some suggestions of the many recommendations of what can be done, and to remember that comprehensive maternity protection is a human right for all female workers, and that improving maternity protection could contribute to decent work and minimum basic incomes for working women. And this would have far-reaching health and development benefits if women were supported to breastfeed. Next slide. I just want to end off with this really kind of clear message in this image from the World Health Organization that was shared on social media this week, that women shouldn't require superpowers to juggle breastfeeding and work. Next slide, please. So thank you very much to everyone for listening. And you're welcome to contact me via email or on Twitter if you have any questions or want any links to any of the resources that have been mentioned. Thank you. Over.
Thank you so much, Katie, for that excellent presentation. You really were able to distill some of the challenges of actually how to put policy into direct action and the challenges, particularly in the informal sector. And I know there were some comments in the Q&A about the informal sector. So it's so important that we highlight the challenges and the obstacles that women there face. Excellent presentation. Now we're moving on to listen to 4 governments from around the world. I'm delighted to introduce all our panelists. So if I would like to welcome our panelists to turn on their video. And we will start with introducing Dr. Wengfen Huang from China. Dr. Huang is the Secretary General of Shenzhen Women and Child Development Foundation from China, and he will be speaking to us in Chinese. So for those of you that wish to listen in Chinese, you will stay on this channel. For everybody else, please go to the English channel, but not yet, wait until he's speaking, and then you will hear the interpretation into English. We also have Giovanna Salazar Ortiz, who is the Vice Minister of Social Provision and Employment of the Minister of Labour from Guatemala, joining us. Then we have Dr. Bulbul, who is the Programme Manager for the National Nutrition Services and is also the Technical Scaling Up Nutrition Focal Point under the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, joining us from Bangladesh. And finally, we have Veronica Corogo, who is the Director of Nutrition and Dietetic Services from the State Department for Public Health and Professional Standards, Ministry of Health in Kenya. So we have a wide geographical representation. All of our eminent speakers are going to tell us about their experience as governments on what they're doing to support women in the workplace to achieve their breastfeeding goals. So I'm going to ask a round of questions to our eminent panelists. And I will start with Dr. Huang. So colleagues, I'm inviting you, once he starts speaking, to move to the English channel on your interpretation services at the bottom of the screen. So Dr. Huang, what did you do to improve maternity protections and workplace provisions for breastfeeding in your country? And what did you hope it would achieve? Over to you.
谢谢主持。首先，深圳根据中国妇女儿童发展纲要制定的相应的深圳市的妇女儿童发展纲要，全面促进妇女儿童的发展。那么这里面呢，把促进母乳喂养始终是这个发展纲要的重要指标。同时，中国的国家卫生健康委员会也发布了母乳喂养促进的行动计划。 这里面也特别指出，在工作场所要提供相应的支持这样的一个要求。我们也知道，中国女性的就业率非常高，在深圳这个城市呢是尤为突出。所以呢，如何让女性休完产假，返回工作后坚持母乳喂养，这是一个非常大的一个挑战。那么深圳呢有很多的企业呢，它有建这个母婴室，并给那个女性提供了挤奶还有储奶的一些设备。 但我们也看到，仍然有一些企业的管理者，他没能够给职工提供足够的家庭友好的安排，就包括给保障女职工的产假的同时，也保障男职工的育儿假，根据育儿的需要，那个弹性安排工作时间，以及其他的育儿服务，这样可以让年轻的父母更好的平衡工作与家庭。 所以呢，我们在深圳呢是率先开展这个家庭友好工作场所的项目，我们认为这个是非常非常重要的一个举措。好，谢谢主持人。
Thank you. Back to the main language channel. Thank you so much for sharing that experience, Dr. Huang. So I'd like to move to our colleague joining us from Guatemala, our Vice Minister of Social Provision and Employment at the Ministry of Labour. Ms. Ortiz, could you please explain to us what have you done in your country to improve maternity protections and workplace provisions for breastfeeding? And what did you hope it would achieve? Over to you.
Buenos días a todos. Gracias. Desde el Ministerio de Trabajo hemos impulsado en conjunto con UNICEF la iniciativa de Espacios Amigos de la Lactancia Materna. Guatemala tiene una legislación que protege básicamente a las mujeres durante el embarazo y aún después del embarazo, pues les otorga una hora, digamos, diaria para que las mujeres puedan regresar a su casa y poder continuar la lactancia. Sin embargo, a través de la iniciativa con UNICEF hemos impulsado en las empresas que puedan abrir algunos espacios donde las mujeres puedan durante todo el día poder hacer esa extracción de la leche para poder tener la leche y llevarla a la casa con los niños. Este esfuerzo que hemos hecho ha sido importante para el ministerio porque hemos visto cómo las empresas han ido sumándose a este esfuerzo. Tenemos empresas de banca, finanzas, el gobierno en general ha abierto espacios. También tenemos mucha industria que está muy interesada en hacerlo. Y lo más importante ha sido ver cómo la gente ha abierto la mente para dar cuenta que no se necesita tanto para poder abrir un espacio y todos los beneficios que eso tiene al momento de abrirlo. A través de UNICEF hemos podido abrir durante todos estos años más espacios amigos de la lactancia materna e inclusive ahora tenemos empresas que están muy interesadas en que el ministerio se pueda acercar, hacer la política de la lactancia, darles el reconocimiento porque permite diferenciarlos de otras empresas. Así que estamos muy contentos y muchas gracias a UNICEF por la ayuda.
Thank you so much. I really appreciated the last comment you made, particularly about using family-friendly policies as an incentive for companies against other companies. So it creates a bit of a competition that if our company provides these services, we're a more desirable company to work for. I think that was a very, very important point. Thank you so much. Now we'd like to move over to Bangladesh. Dr. Bulbul from the National Nutrition Services. Could you please provide us your experiences of what you did and what your government did to improve maternity protections and workplace provisions for breastfeeding in Bangladesh? Over to you.
Thank you, Granny Molany. First of all, I would like to thank WHO, UNICEF, and other organizations for arranging such wonderful events. Actually, you all know that breast milk has been recognized significantly as the gold standard for the infant feeding, as well as the benefits of the newborn and infant significantly in terms of protecting them from life-threatening infections, preventing them chronic childhood illness, and that actually reduce healthcare costs, especially for the low and middle income parents. So our government has actually taken some initiatives to improve the, breast milk or the breastfeeding availability in our workplace. So what actually we have done, first of all, we have taken the recommendations from the evidence. So we have set up our policies as mentioned earlier, that is, family-friendly policies. So our National Nutrition Policy, then our Plan of Action, and as well as our PMS Act. So all these options has together, we try to focus on the maternity protection as well as workplace provisions for breastfeeding. Another one is, that our target is for the exclusive breastfeeding is to achieve the 70%. So still we are lagging behind. And we found that a greater number of women are actually working in different places. So this is very much important to us to include themselves into our policies as well as our plans. So what actually we have done, we made multiple initiatives like making 6 months paid maternity leave for the government employees, as well as we have taken initiatives for the BMS registration process. Then we have strengthened the BMS Act monitoring. And finally, we are regulating the packaging options of the BMS by our Institute of Public Health Nutrition. And furthermore, we try to focus to make some innovative, impactful initiatives. One initiative we have taken is called Mothers at Work, that is initiated by UNICEF in 2017. And we bring together all our partners, like other ministries, Ministry of Labor and Employment, as well as we have taken a lot of suggestions and recommendations from ILO to make it more, oriented for the, workplace friendly. Then we have developed multiple, IC materials like information, education, and communication materials, and where we have identified that how a mother can actually express their breast milk and keep it into home, as well as how we can make the 7 minimum standard of maternity protection, that breastfeeding space, then bread and corners, as well as childcare provision and paid maternity leave. So all these things actually we are trying to figure out that how we could actually make impact on improving the exclusive breastfeeding rate. And finally, we have found, and we did some piloting, and we found that greater job satisfaction is really important. And the worker or the employee, they are loyal to the employers. So it helps to retain the staffs, especially the skillful staffs. So finally, it's an investment for the working mother, for the business. So all these consequences we have identified, and we are trying to make the workplace friendly for the breastfeeding. I will say later more on these issues. And finally, I want to thank to Emmanuel and Catherine for very wonderful and precise presentation, where they just showed that paid maternity leave and breastfeeding supports really helps for the working women. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bulbul, for the very comprehensive update of what you're doing in Bangladesh. And I think, again, you highlighted very clearly that these types of policies are good for mom, for baby, and for business. So this is definitely an investment that has many, many returns that also need to be looked at more closely when we do our advocacy. Now we're going to move south. We are going to Kenya, and where we have Veronica Kurogo, our Director of Nutrition and Dietetic Services. So Veronica, could you highlight for us, what did you do in Kenya to improve maternity protections and workplace provisions, and what did you hope it would achieve?
Thank you, Gloria, and good evening, everyone. It's good, first of all, to lay the context for Kenya in terms of our breastfeeding situation, that we are at 60% of the children being exclusively breastfed. That is as per the Kenya Demographic and Health Survey 2022. And this, in the last 2 decades, has improved, because in 2003, we were at 13%. So it's quite an improvement, but we have now stagnated very far from the 70% target for 2030. And therefore, considering that half of the women, half of the labor force is women, and who need to also enjoy the maternity protection for them to be able to exclusively breastfeed. As a country, we did enact a legal framework to be able to improve the maternity protection. Starting from our Constitution of Kenya 2010, which give every child the right to basic nutrition. And of course, the basic nutrition for under 6 months is the breast milk. We also did, through the Employment Act, provides for 90 days or 3 months paid maternity leave, and also 2 weeks paid paternity leave. Last year, an amendment was done to the Employment Act to include pre-adoptive leave for 1 month. So we are also looking at the families that are adopting children and they need to either board and also feed them properly. Apart from that, looking at, yes, 90 days maternity leave, but women get back before the 6 months. So how do they sustain breastfeeding? We did enact Health Act in 2017, and this requires every employer to establish a lactation station in the workplace. In addition to that, the same act provides for nursing breaks up to a maximum of 1 hour, which is exclusive of the one hour meal break to enable nursing employees to be able to express or go to breastfeed. The same act also emphasizes that the lactation station in the workplace are not to be allowed to be areas where infant formula manufacturer come and promote or market the infant formula. Additionally, we also have the Breast Milk Substitute Act that we enacted in 2012 to be able to provide for marketing and distribution of breast milk substitute. In 2021, we enacted the regulations to prescribe how certain areas in the Breast Milk Substitute Act should be implemented, mainly the labeling and interaction between health workers, manufacturers, and distributors. Of course, the legal framework are not enough without the implementation guidelines. And to do this, we have developed some guidelines, like guidelines for securing breastfeeding environment and workplace, and we have disseminated, and we have been able even to disseminate to the private sector. And in collaboration with UNICEF, we have been working with the Kenya Private Sector Alliance, and they have been able to establish lactation stations in over 100 of their company company members. We also have the national framework for implementation of the Breast Milk Act, also to prescribe how the act will be implemented. But having all these documents requires very good coordination. So we have coordination structures in place in the division of nutrition, where this work is domiciled. We have a technical working group on maternal and infant and young child nutrition. But we also have a task force that look at the workplace, and these are the drivers for the implementation of maternity protection and the workplace provision. Additionally, of course, we know this requires a lot of advocacy, especially for the compliance. And we have been engaging with the stakeholders. Like during this week, we have engaged with the lawmakers, the parliamentarian. We have engaged with the human resource manager, both from public and private sector. And we also have engaged the policymakers, so that we are able to improve in terms of the compliance of this legal instrument. And I can say that right now, in terms of knowledge of the existing law is there, because we have engaged also the media, and therefore we are hoping moving forward, we'll be able to enhance the compliance to these acts so that we can create a very conducive environment in the workplace for the breastfeeding mothers. Maybe just before I return to the Gronia, is that to say, yes, speakers have said about the informal sector. Even for us, informal sector, providing that breastfeeding friendly workplace is also a challenge, but we have some county government who are actually leading the way We have had county government establishing breastfeeding places in the market, in the green grocer market, which has enabled the mothers who are working as traders in those markets to continue breastfeeding. Thank you, and back to you, Gloria.
Thank you so much, Veronica. I think that was a great example of the progression of the different types of policies that the government has put in and some of the challenges. And it's very heartening to learn that over 100 companies are now putting in place these policies. So a lot to learn from Kenya. Thank you so much. I have one final question that I would like to pose to each of our panelists, and I'm going to start with Dr. Huang. Dr. Huang, you provided a very nice overview of the work that you're doing in Shenzhen on family-friendly policies and highlighted the efforts that companies are doing, including providing facilities and encouraging mothers to have that work-life balance. So based on your experience, what would be the one lesson you would like to share for other countries who would like to adopt the type of policies you have in place in their setting? And again, colleagues, please join the English channel for interpretation.
好的，在回答主持的这个问题的同时，我也想把那个在中国做的一些工作，也作为一个案例把它介绍一下。其实我觉得很核心的一点就是我们把推动母乳喂养纳入了联合国儿基会在全球的儿童友好型城市建设、家庭友好工作场所倡议，我认为这也是至关重要的一点。我们在商业场所，比如说购物中心。公共场所，比如说公园、政务中心、机场等，这里会去建母婴室。但同时，我们也重视在办公室、厂区和工业园区去建母婴室，为雇主提供母乳喂养知识，并且呢实施家庭友好型工作场所政策来支持母乳喂养。我们在2022年在联合国儿基会的支持下，我们在深圳全市开展倡导的活动。一方面向当地的企业去宣传家庭友好公共政策，另外一方面在媒体还有像在地铁投放公益广告，向公众去宣传这个家庭友好工作场所政策的关键信息。那这个活动我们也得到了妇联还有深圳市总工会的支持，同时呢也有4家制造业、服务行业和互联网的企业承诺采取行动，通过提供带薪育儿假、实行弹性工作制、增加育儿方式等等投入方式，打造家庭友好工作场所。我们的这样的一个公众的传播，在1个月内覆盖的人数超过380万。而且呢，我们在基于家庭友好的倡议的时候呢，我们也是有目标的去选择合作的企业来做示范点，对企业管理者进行培训，建议他们提供基础设施，比如母婴室，但更加建议他们提升到对人的投资，就包括落实孕产假、陪产假，减轻年轻父母的育儿压力同时呢，通过培训年轻的父母，让他们获得工作和家庭的技能，同时也积极推动各项的家庭政策的落实。对于优秀个案的雇主，我们还给予授牌嘉奖。这个项目在做到后来，联合国儿童基金会对项目实施的企业进行的调查显示，85%的员工认为，就家庭友好政策能够很好的支持他们平衡家庭和工作，也有76%的工厂的管理者反映，实施家庭友好工作场所项目后，他们的职工的工作积极性是有极大的提高的。所以就我们其实回到像这样的一个，我们在像深圳，它是超过2000万的一个大城市去推动母乳喂养呢，它是一个系统的工程，它需要跟不同的利益相关方来去互动。一方面我们会跟政府部门保持密切的联系，基于中国的这个妇女儿童发展纲要，还有母乳喂养的推动行动计划去开展工作。另外一方面呢，又跟联合国儿基会呢做深度的合作，在儿童友好型城市和家庭友好工作场所这2个项目的框架下来去推动母乳喂养。同时呢，针对深圳的女性就业率高，那么在工作场所和公共场所都以建设母婴室为切入点，然后来去推动用人单位实施家庭友好，支持母乳喂养。好，谢谢。
Apologies, I hadn't muted. Thank you so much, Dr. Huang, for that excellent overview of what you have been doing. 20 million people is many countries' population. So I think the numbers that you have achieved in such a short time of reaching 3.8 million people is really impressive. I also liked how you show that this is a whole of society initiative. It's not just about the government. It's about letting the employees know their rights and understanding their rights and surveying them and understanding their needs, and also the employers. Your public health campaign in the metro stations, very interesting examples for many of our participants to really take home, particularly working in urban populations where we have large numbers of women in the workforce. Thank you so much. Now moving to Guatemala. I would like to ask our Vice Minister, what lessons would you like to give to those participants joining us from around the world? We have over 1,000 people online. What messages and lessons from Guatemala would you like to share? Thank you. And moving to the English channel.
Gracias. De lo que hemos aprendido es que las empresas que tienen jefaturas de recursos humanos en mujeres, por ejemplo, es mucho más fácil poder ingresar a estos procesos de iniciativas de la lactancia materna, porque son más empáticas a esta situación. Y eso nos ha permitido ir dando cuenta la importancia de la mujer en el trabajo, ¿verdad? Y el apoyo mutuo que existe en las mujeres para poder hacer estos cambios en cada una de las empresas. Otra de las cosas es que al capacitar a los directivos de las empresas en relación a la importancia, los ahorros que tiene la lactancia materna, los beneficios que dan y lo poco que se tiene que hacer para adecuar espacios para las mujeres puedan tener la extracción, es cuando nos damos cuenta que es el desconocimiento el que no permite que se abran más, porque cuando ven que son pequeños cambios, que no es tan complicado hacer esos cambios, se nota que creían que era mucho más complicado poder aperturar estos espacios. Entonces, como lo decían otros países, la comunicación, las promociones que podamos hacer permiten que la gente pueda aperturar su mente para darse cuenta que no es tan difícil aperturar espacios, que los beneficios que tienen las mujeres para producir leche, para poder sacar la leche, tenerla guardada, podérsela llevar a su casa, lo cómodas que se sienten estar en un espacio, permite que también sea más trabajo y un ambiente laboral mucho más cómodo para todos. Creo que hemos aprendido también que la competencia en las empresas también impulsa a que las empresas se puedan unir. Cada vez que nosotros hacemos un reconocimiento la empresa lo de la prensa, en sus redes sociales y en lo demás, y eso provoca una cadena para que más empresas del mismo sector empiecen a preguntar por qué los están reconociendo, cuál es lo que están haciendo, y eso nos permite ir aperturando más. Entonces creo que publicitar esto, aunque es un derecho fundamental que todos lo deberían de tener, pero para poder cambiar la mentalidad, creo que es importante publicitarlo y hacer esos reconocimientos para que más personas puedan unirse a las iniciativas.
Thank you so much, and I really appreciate that you referred to the fact when there's female leadership, this is easier to put these policies in place, but that perhaps, as you also say, that when our male leadership see that it's actually not that difficult and the returns are high, that indeed they are very supportive. So we shouldn't assume that these policies are not in place for the wrong reasons. It's a lot of education, awareness raising, and communication. So excellent examples. Thank you so much from Guatemala. Now moving over to Bangladesh, Dr. Bulbul, what would be the one key lesson you would like to share with our participants online?
Thank you so much. Actually, I will focus on the strategic partnership mainly because it's really important to engage all partners to move forward. So you have to engage especially the private sectors, because a large number of women employees really works in the private sectors. And our government has actually improves or really push forward for the public-private partnerships. So including like the academia for the research, as well as the technical expertise to develop the evidence-based messaging for the toolkits, as well as developing the business case, and finally, complementing and leveraging. So all these things is very much important to actually improve the situation at the workplace. Finally, we try to explore the feasibility of the plain packaging, similar to the Bangladesh as a best practice as part of the EMS Act, and to explore the adoption of the digital code of marketing violation as detection of tool at the country level. So we have taken all these steps, and finally we started a very small scale, but we are trying to make it scale up the programs, and we are including all the private sectors, especially relates with the income generating process, like those which are really involved with the export import sectors as well, like government sectors. So we are trying to focus on that issues. And finally, one thing that we have to make proper advocacy for our policymakers, that we are trying to do, and we are successful in a sense, because we have started few projects, as well as our next sector plan will be developed in 2024. Also, we'll focus, and especially we'll target the workless mother. So these all our achievement, as well as our plans for moving forward together. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bulbul. And again, for reminding us that it's not just about putting family-friendly policies in place, but we also need all of the elements of a successful breastfeeding program, which includes full enforcement of the Code of Marketing of Breast Milk Substitutes. I think a very important message. Finally, we are going to Kenya. Veronica, what is the one message you would like to share with all of us online from Kenya's experience?
Thank you, Gronia. For us, I think one of the key things that we have learned is that, yes, having the legal framework in place is one thing, but they need to be publicized, engaging the stakeholder, raising awareness about the policies and why we are having to implement this maternity protection workplace policy, so that people can understand and be able to implement the maternity policies and workplace policy at the workplace. We also learned that especially identifying champion to drive the agenda is also very important. Like in the last parliament, we had a very good champion, a member of parliament. As much as it was dramatic, that time the parliament did not have breastfeeding spaces, and the member of parliament came with a child in the chamber, and it really created a lot of crisis, and the parliament had to establish one. I mean, that's the champion that drives the cause, and we have continued identifying those champions so that we are able to, in every county, we are able to have the various employers implement the maternity protection and also the workplace policy. But I think also something else finally is that public-private partnership is also very important. For us, working with the private sector through the association has actually enhanced the implementation of this law. And therefore, it's a matter of not, policing so much or hammering because we have a law, but getting onto the table so that there's ownership and people feel that they need to implement these policies at the workplace. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and for reminding us that sometimes it just takes a female minister or a member of parliament to show the reality and bring her baby into the parliament. What a great example. And I think we have many countries in the world where when that happens, actually policies do change. So great to hear that there's a similar case in Kenya. Now, colleagues, we are out of time, unfortunately, for more questions, but could I kindly ask that all panelists put their cameras on, including our earlier speakers, Fatmata and Manuela and Katie. I think it's been a fantastic session. Unfortunately, no time to answer all the questions, but I'm just going to put one question to Manuela because it has popped up a few times from the ILO perspective. And that is, will ILO increase the minimum maternity leave of 14 weeks to be closer to the 6 months recommendation for exclusive breastfeeding? Manuela.
I would love to. Thank you for the question, and certainly I would love to give a positive answer. I'm not in a position to respond, but it is something that we would like to keep high in the agenda, certainly within the transformative agenda for gender equality and the overall work on the care economy. Having said that, you know very well that the international labor standards apply to all countries, and not every country is in a position to increase maternity protection. So in a way, while we need to continue pushing for it, and certainly, you know, the standard itself, it's a minimum requirement. So any country that is doing more is certainly welcome to do so. In the recommendation, if I'm not wrong, in fact, the recommendation is to increase even more up to 16 weeks or 18 weeks, I think, sorry, 18 weeks. So I think, you know, the goodwill of all of us will eventually take us there, but it's going to take time.
Thank you so much, Emanuela. And that's a very important point, that this is it's a floor as opposed to a ceiling recommendation. So it is a minimum standard. So all countries, of course, should be encouraged to go as far as they can to support women in the workplace. So I would like to thank our esteemed panelists and speakers. You all did a fantastic job. The questions have been, and the chat have been acknowledging how much richness and expertise you've all provided, so thank you so much. We unfortunately don't have time to take any more questions, but I would like to reassure everybody that the video recording will be shared with all participants. It will also be posted on the Global Breastfeeding Collective in all the languages that were recorded today. And one observation that came in that we fully agree with is we would like more geographical and cultural and ethnic diversity in our Voices of Mothers video. We did try our best to get more moms to share their videos, but in the time we had, unfortunately, we didn't reach as many people as we would like. But we are leaving this link open because this is a rolling video that we would love to continue to update. So if I could kindly ask Anju to post the link in the chat, and for all of you online to share with all of your friends and contacts and colleagues, if they would like to share their breastfeeding story, please share and post, and then they might get a chance to be posted on our video on the Global Breastfeeding Collective. I would also like to remind you all, you can access these amazing resources on the Global Breastfeeding Collective website, on the ILO website, and we will be updating the Global Breastfeeding Scorecard as we do annually in November, which will show updates of progress of countries against our key policy asks, and of course, this being one, family-friendly policies. So we will be profiling the information from ILO on how countries are doing. Before we go to our closing remarks, however, I would like to thank the amazing planning committee behind this amazing event today. We've had a very hard working group of colleagues working behind the scenes, from UNICEF and WHO and our GBC planning committee volunteers from different civil society groups. So a special shout out to Fatmata and Jeanette, and Anju and Sophie and Nina. And if I've forgotten anyone, I'm so sorry, but really you've done an amazing job working very hard in the last month to pull this all together. So with that, our closing remarks will come from WHO, from Dr. Francesco Branca, who is the head of the Department of Nutrition and Food Safety at the World Health Organization. So we will close with that. Thank you all for joining us online, and happy World Breastfeeding Week. Thank you.